think, did you get a chance to answer hers? Or?
I can go over it.
Perfect. And then I believe the woman in the white shirt, you'll go next. And then just keep raising your hands and we'll keep adding.
I'm sorry, I'm going to do it quickly, but I'm
No, he's going to answer for her first and then you.
I would just reiterate that we're doing those refreshing and training now as far as asking for cross streets for Roosevelt Island. So hopefully in the future a situation like that won't occur again.
Is there any benefit to using zip code?
No. It's, if you just explain you're in Roosevelt Island, there's no cross streets. If possible, use a landline. That is my best advice, especially the landline. If there's any, because we get your full address when you use a landline.
Okay, now this is, I am concerned with your preference that people use a landline, because I do believe that landlines are going the way of the dodo. And you will be getting more and more phone calls coming in from cell phones. And I feel that perhaps the technologies should be updated to handle not only cell phones, but text messages. And the final part of the question is, do you need the money that Governor Cuomo is diverting from the 911 fund? Do you need that money to update the equipment for cell phones and texts?
I'm not familiar with that last part of the question, and I'm really not in a position to answer that question as far as Governor Cuomo and the money, because to be honest, I'm not familiar with that. We're very aware of cell phones are, again, at 70%, so we are trained, we realize that. We're just saying if it's possible to use a landline. If you can't, 70% of our calls are through cell phones, so we understand that. I'm just saying if you happen to be in your house, and I haven't had to call 911, but even when I'm in my house, I have a landline. I pick up my cell phone because it's right next to me. I'm just saying if you have both options, please use the landline.
And my question is, should your equipment be updated to allow for all the cell phone calls you will be getting and text messages?
I could just touch upon that. The city is exploring options of going to text to 911. So we're actively engaged with that process, and the NYPD is supportive of that.
Sorry, hold on. Okay, so Sharon Berman had raised her hand, followed by Ellen Pallaby, and if you would like to ask a question, you will be third. And again, thank you everyone for asking quick questions and giving him a chance to answer. Thank you.
I'd like to use the microphone because we're in a unique situation because we're such a small community and we have public safety right across the street, as you must know. Did you read what the ex-editor of our community newspaper wrote about and his inability to get 911 to, you're looking blank, you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, in the last issue of our community newspaper, somebody eloquently wrote about his problems trying to communicate with somebody at 911, and he finally called public safety. What I want to know is, my understanding is that if we call 911, or rather if we call public safety, they then contact 911. Does it work the other way? Because since it's such a small community, public safety can arrive at our doorstep often within a couple of minutes, and they may be even able to provide some aid.
Okay.
So how does that work? That's what I'm asking you. And if you don't know the answer, then maybe you should, find out.
Thank you, Sharon, for the question, and we'll bring our Public Safety Department Chief up to answer because he gets to live and breathe this every day, and thank you for keeping Roosevelt Island safe.
Yes, Ms. Berman. We recommend that residents call 911. I'm sorry, you can't hear?
Ben, explain to him I can't hear loud.
Speak directly and as loud as possible.
No, I know.
I would love to know what he's saying, but I can't hear.
Okay, I'll speak louder.
No, that's not gonna help. I'm hearing impaired.
I understand.
There is no accommodation, and I have no idea what you're saying. I'm sorry.
All right, well, I'll answer the question anyway. There is no automatic dispatch when you call 911 to public safety. We recommend that in all cases of serious medical emergencies, that you dial 911. However, my officers are trained in defibrillator use, so an accompanying call to public safety could actually help.
Okay, so Ellen is next, followed by the woman in the orange, and then I'll call the next group of folks.
Tuesday.
No, Ellen first, then.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is there any benefit to mentioning that the entrance to Roosevelt Island is on Vernon Boulevard and 36th Avenue? That's the first question. The second question is, if we're using a voice over IP or a cable phone, is that different than a landline in the way that you can identify the location?
Okay, and the first question, as long as you I wouldn't suggest telling them where the entrance is, because some people call 911 and they feel that the people they're speaking to are actually the ones that are driving there or going to travel there. Their routing, which is electronically typing, and then they transmit the information to a dispatcher, who in turn will raise the police officers, EMS, fire trucks over the radio. So I would just suggest sticking with your address, making it as clear as possible, let them know you're on Roosevelt Island and that there's not cross streets. And the second part of your question?
Voice over IP.
If it's registered to your house, it would come up with your house address.
If you want to just work your way back.
Okay, sure.
Tuesday, I called 911, and they asked me what was the cross street, where was I between? And I told them, now before they could come, because it was an asthmatic situation, the fire department came first and handled the situation.
Okay. Well, that worked correctly, because that went through 911. I'll explain even further, just so everybody understands. When you call 911, you're actually connected to an NYPD 911 operator. If it involves you have a need for an ambulance or a fire truck, we actually conference the caller in to EMS for an ambulance or the fire department. So in that case, we conferenced and processed the call. Sure. Miss, go ahead.
Can you also conference in our public safety department? And you make them part of the process so that immediately they can respond? Without a second phone call. Because if somebody's, having a traumatic moment, the last thing that they need is to have to think of another telephone number and dial again. So if you could automatically conference in public safety, that may, in fact, help to ameliorate the problem.
That's something that we don't do as of right now. I'm sorry? I know. Well, just, okay. That may be difficult to do just because we have manpower restrictions, and every call that we stay on, that prevents our operator from answering another call. So it's time consuming. I could explore, I could look into things, but I don't want to tell you we'll be able to do that.
The system is set up so that it automatically conferences, right? It automatically conferences the fire department.
Yes.
And and you are the police department answering this phone call. So when it's a Roosevelt Island call, can't it be set up so that it automatically conferences public safety? Not another phone call, not keeping people on the line, but automatically conferences.
I understand your question, I'll answer. Roosevelt Island doesn't have the same system that we have, and so that isn't possible. That's not possible. EMS and the fire department, we're able to electronically route that information to their screen. So they have a computer system that speaks with our computer system. Roosevelt Island does not have that system, and I would imagine that would be very expensive.
Why fire department unit on Roosevelt Island is not responding to our 911 calls?
Do you want to bring up?
Yeah,
If you want to come up and introduce yourself.
the firehouse that's on Roosevelt.
Okay.
Your question is why don't they respond from the firehouse that's on Roosevelt Island? The firehouse that's on Roosevelt Island is a special operations command. That's the rescue units and the squad units. The units that respond to Roosevelt Island for fires and medical emergencies are Engine 260 and Ladder 116 right over the bridge in Queens. So when you don't see them coming out of that firehouse to come to your emergency, that's the reason.
But do you have a training to
I don't
respond?
understand.
Do you have appropriate training to respond?
Absolutely.
So why
All
don't
engine
you-
companies are CFR certified, certified first responder. It's a little bit low with an EMS.
So since we have you right here on the island, why you cannot respond to our calls?
It's not set up that way. That's a special operations command. That's the command of special operations. Rescue units, if somebody is stuck on a tower and we need a high angle rescue, that's who would respond. Somebody having a heart attack, that's not who responds. An engine company will respond. They have defibrillators, they have oxygen.
Okay.
Good evening. Sorry for the lack of introduction. My name is Deputy Assistant Chief Tony Napoli. I am the Chief of Emergency Medical Dispatch for the 911 system. And we make the joke, it's the Napoli and Napolitano team. We didn't know that in advance before we both got assigned there. Well, let's just talk about the 911 system, exactly what you just brought up. First off, I just wanted to echo what Inspector Napolitano just said. 911 is a system. It's not a single entity. This is something that the entire city works together on, and it's under the mayor and under all the other entities that build into it. So it says it's not one person or one group working alone. And exactly what the inspector was saying, if you dial 911 and you have a medical emergency, the police department or the police communication technician does take the initial address, as he did say, and then it is passed off to either emergency medical dispatch or is passed along to fire alarm dispatch. Both of those entities under my command, under the Bureau of Communication. With that, we basically look at it this way. Now, a few questions that came up is the first object was cross streets. Yes, they are confirmed, and yes, they are confusing. But like everybody did echo, there are so many similar streets. That is the way that we can determine, are you in the right place that we are going to? So, and I just give you a quick example, and I know some of the issues that came up may seem very convoluted or complicated, but if we ask you, are you between, and I just give you an example, if you said on the island, you are between 67th and 68th Street, well, we know right away you're not on Roosevelt Island. And you would be surprised of the amount of calls that we do. On the police department, I don't like using too many numbers, but they're dealing with approximately 14,000, 10 million calls a year, about 14,000 calls a day. On the emergency medical service, we're now handling 4,600 calls a day. It's getting quite extensive, so we have to confirm that we are going to the right place. And we do acknowledge we are learning as things move along and as neighborhoods change. I've been taking all my notes for exactly what everybody else has been saying. So with that, let's bring up the second part that you brought up with public safety. We have the public safety number on the emergency medical service side and the fire department side, that if we have an issue, we have the phone number that we can call public safety back, and I think you can confirm we have called back on many occasions that we are responding to the island, and can somebody direct us? And again, I call this a system. I don't call it, we try not to work independently, but we try to work with everybody together. Some of the other things I wanted to get back to. A gentleman brought up the address of 777. While I was sitting here, I dialed back into my dispatch center. 777 comes up. It is an identified building through the New York City Department of Office of Emergency Management through GIS. It shows up. The system is 770 to 789 comes up as the block that that building exists. So be confident.
It doesn't actually exist.
Well, so be confident that
In your database, it is.
that it does exist in the database. And if it didn't, and things along that line, as the inspector also said, we are learning on an everyday basis. And I wanted to go back to somebody that had asked you about a letter that was written 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago about an incident. Please, that has to be addressed to either through your office or somebody else's office to the Bureau of Communications, because we have to identify that early on. Just like tonight, a gentleman gave me Cornwell Tech's information that is being built. We need to map that out on the island, exactly where it is and how we're going to respond to it, so we can identify it with our ambulance crews. So it is a system. And if I can sort of leave on a last one, something we teach on the emergency medical side. They call it the chain of survival. You've heard it through everybody many a times. You are part of the chain of survival. You have to get it right first before you can give it to us. And then we have to get it right in order to respond. And as long as we can do that, then we give the person or the people the best chance they can possibly do. I tend to make a little joke on the fire side. I usually joke. Fire makes it a little bit easier. Unfortunately, if there is a fire, they can follow the smoke. But even in a medical situation, if people aren't helping us, as simple as coming off an elevator, whether it's go through a police officer or through EMS, direct us. Send somebody downstairs to show the ambulance where to come in. Public safety on the island, I do commend you from my people, from what they're telling me. There is usually an officer waiting for when the ambulance arrives to escort them to where they're going, and they do assist. I've spoken to my counterpart on the fire side, and they say the same thing for the engines and ladders that are responding onto the island. So it does go around. As I said, it's not a single entity. We all have to work together. We try to do the best we can. But if there is a problem, it does need to be detailed and conveyed to the Bureau of Communication for both the police department and the fire department. And we'll do the best we can.
Thank you.